What's good, everybody? In this video, I just want to depict how different players or different personnel can perform better in different mindsets. You know what I mean? And so this principle or, this ideology stretches far beyond basketball, but to, highlight my point, I'm going to use some basketball analogies and, basketball anecdotes. So we got Mike, right? Michael Jordan, one of the greatest of all time. He was fueled by anger, right? A lot of times he exaggerated stories to fuel himself. To dive into an anecdote about Mike, right? One of his more catalytic stories that he used for decades was him being cut in high school. And I feel like it was a little bit exaggerated, but to dive into that, it was between him and another player. The other player being a guy named Leroy Smith, who was about 6'7". Right, Mike was 5'11" at the time, and so in high school, if I'm a coach, I'm gonna choose the 6'7" guy over the 5'11" guy any day of the week. But Mike made it personal, right? Mike made it about his self-worth. Mike made it about his skill set, and Mike used that to fuel him and propel him to culminate within his career. And I commend that, right? He was geared that way. And he understood how he was wired. And so he built off that. I'm not mad at that. You know what I'm saying? And so that just reinforces my point, that Mike was, fueled by anger majority of the time. To expound on that, Jerry Krause, right, in head office for the Chicago Bulls, he mentioned that players don't win championships, organizations does, which is true to an extent. You know what I'm saying? But the players, they got to go out there. They got to handle business for them to, be champions. All right, so that's true. But Mike made it personal. And what that did was that fueled him to perform on the floor. Like, that's what it was. Mike was that type of player. He would psych himself out to go perform. That's how he's geared. And then on the other end of the spectrum, you got somebody like John Stockton, who exhibited equanimity when they played. He was an even-keeled guy, never got into a scuffle with anybody, polite on and off the floor. That's just who he was. But he was effective in that. Somebody like Gary Payton, who talked trash, was superb trash talker. Got guys out of their element through just his verbiage. Going back and forth. It fueled him, but it drained and it took the focus from the players, his opponents, I'm going to say, right? And so he said that John Stockton was his Achilles tendon because he couldn't get into John Stockton's mind, right? He couldn't manipulate him or anything. He would talk trash and John Stockton would keep that same facial expression and he would play his game. And he did well. He did very well, And so these are different personnel within the game of basketball. But what they did it effectively. And it worked for them. You got Gary Payton, one of the greatest on-ball defenders of all time. One of the ultimate competitors the game has ever seen. And he was productive in what he did in his career, right? He's going down as one of the greats. John Stockton. This guy has assists and steal records that nobody can't even touch. They can't even scratch the surface of those numbers. And then you got Mike, the GOAT. And even beyond sports, we have individuals with different approaches, different mentalities, different preparation, but they're effective in their own right. And so what works for them works for them. And so there's more than one way to be successful. There's more than one way to be productive. Right? There's more than one way to be a winner.